So welcome to those of you who are joining us on YouTube. It's great to have you here, and thank you for joining us one more time. This is another in the monthly series. I think this is the longest continuous series of webinars that I have hosted, Eric. It's quite amazing to me how this has grown from an emergency event in the pandemic to a community that is talking about all things financial in ways that are really, really helpful. So the transition and the growth of this community has been remarkable, and it's been a privilege to be a part of it. So welcome once again, and welcome in, this will be the last one I guess we do for 2021. I don't think we're going to meet on the 24th of December. I think many of us are busy doing something else that week.
I thought we had it already. Come on.
You can come if you want to, Clyde. I'm not going to send you away, but I don't think I'm going to be there.
Oh, okay.
But we will certainly pick up again in the new year. Anyway, welcome, and let me remind you again. We're going to mute your mics so that you don't we don't interrupt each other. We've got 119 people in the room here, and so that just makes life a little more complicated if everybody turns their mics on. So I will do that now. And as we've done every time we've met, want to invite you to use the chat to make your comments. And some of us have enough brain cells to be able to read the chat and also listen to what Eric and his team have to say. Many of us don't, and that's okay. My job here is to read the chat and to kind of curate the questions and pull them together and then pose them to the speakers at appropriate stopping points. So I'll be doing that madly and cutting and pasting into words so that you don't have to. But the other thing that has evolved in the chat is that people have been sharing good ideas. So if you have an extra pair of brain cells that you want to watch in that, you might find there's a few tips that come up in the chat that one of us doesn't have a chance to raise up in the webinar. So that kind of thing happens too. But as I say, I'll be watching for questions. And let me turn things over to Eric, and we can begin. Eric, over to you.
Okay, folks, good evening. By my count, this is number 8 or so for the year, and I think we're well into the 20s now in terms of these sessions. Tonight, we're going to do a couple of things a little differently. It's going to be a little more interactive. We're going to be polling you on a few things around what you're doing or what you need and what has changed as we come out of COVID. So, regulars will know I always start with the creed and have this up saying we are called to be the church. And then I take a moment for our land acknowledgement. And we in Toronto, where most of your speakers are broadcasting from, we acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We are grateful for the opportunity to live and work here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. This recognition must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities.
Okay. Eric, I want to remind you that you're showing us the edit screen of PowerPoint, and that you might do better just to hit the button on your ribbon that says from the current slide so that we just see the slide and not all of the extra stuff.
Okay, let me just...
Top right of your screen is the top left of your screen is it's the second button in. It says from current slide.
Okay, well, let me... I'm struggling here.
Okay.
Slide. I'll tell you what, I'm going to keep...
Tell you what, why don't I share this myself, and you can futz around with it in your own time when somebody else is presenting and figure out how to do it, and then you can take it back when you're ready.
Okay, fire away.
In the meantime, here you are. Just give me a nod when you want me to move the screen ahead.
Going. I must be out of practice. You'd think that would be something. Yeah, so one more. And next screen. So, what we're going to cover tonight there's not a lot of sort of brand new things, but for anyone that's new, we'll just recap the key, most recent and time-sensitive items related to the federal programs, to budgeting tools, assessment information. We'll have some new information for team pay year end and so on. And then we're going to spend a bit of time in a very interactive way with talking about what we might look like coming out of COVID. Are we going right back to the collection plate, or are we going to need to be looking at way more electronic ways of doing things? So with that, next slide, please. A quick reminder, again, those of you who hear this might be tiring of it, but the reason we do our treasurer work and all the administrative aspects of the broader church is so many others, and hopefully us too, can concentrate on the mission and outreach activities that bring us together in common cause. So thank you for supporting the Mission and Service Fund, and we hope that folks can continue to support that generously. Next slide. Okay, so the federal announcements, it's pretty certain, even looking from the throne speech yesterday and some of the debate I've seen today, that the wage subsidy programs won't be extended. There's a narrower mandate for the Canada Recovery Hiring Program, which uses the same data and spreadsheet structure as the wage subsidy, but it won't apply to most of us. We've been saying all along, do the calculations just in case. But in the case of the Canada Recovery Hiring Program, you need to be staffing up for that to work. And again, if we've been into this a long time, the deadline for the wage subsidy applications is 180 days after, 6 months after the applicable period. And we're asking, of course, that you do both calculations. Next slide, please. This one will be a repeat. Just in terms of many of you, I know my congregation is embarked on the budget cycle. So the key assumptions that you might want to be aware of, all of these are online as well. If you were to Google budgeting tools for treasurers on our website, or search for that. But here are the key rates that apply for budgeting ministry personnel costs in particular. And we have seen some increase in benefit costs on the employer side with the core benefit program premiums having to go up. Next slide. So the main point here is, some people ask me, what should I budget for revenues? And, my answer is, it depends on what's happening in your locale. Donation revenue giving's held up reasonably well from statistics that we've seen so far for 2020 and 2021. But it's going to depend how quickly we reopen, how much you can get the any building use revenues going, that kind of thing. So I certainly tell my governors that there's more uncertainty in our budgets these days than there ever has been. Again, insurance premiums too have gone up markedly, 50% over the last 2 years. We're hoping, and I'm just going to say hope, that will stabilize. We've been getting some indication that there won't be huge increases. I'm currently negotiating for 0, but I'm also getting pushback. So that's all I can say about the insurance premiums, which and the corporate negotiation for that is effective the March renewal. Okay, next slide, please. Again, this is a slide from last time. I included in the package for anyone that's new. Someone mentioned just before we started that T3010 preparation. just to say, these are the, where the most unusual transactions would go on your T3010 for the 2021 year. And right now, I think the plan is for our January webinar to do a full walkthrough for T3010 completion. That includes, what to do before you fill it out, and then sort of a line by line walkthrough. So those of you who've done the T3010 a long time might want a refresher or not, but certainly new folks, we're hearing a lot of requests for that. Next slide. Okay, and Steve, I'm just going to say that Angelica should be aboard and will be taking on the slide after this. So I'm hoping that she is there.
She is here. Yep, all set and ready.
Failing that, I will fake it as best I can.
Aren't you good at faking it?
Yeah.
Sure, I can take this one.
Yeah. Well, no. Just to say on this one, we're still getting occasional reports of people receiving CRA discrepancy letters, and at least we say here on this slide that the issue is probably related to the 10% wage subsidy. That's 100% true in my case. Every case I've seen has been that. And again, I would expect that most of the folks here would know that to have submitted a PD 27 form. But if you haven't, that's how you fix it. And I'm just seeing Paul's question here. Do CEWS grants go as federal? Yes, they do. All that money is from the federal government. The only provincial money would be in Manitoba. They had a grant, I think last fall sometime. But generally the CEWS programs, the CEBA loans, those are all federal programs for reporting. Okay, Angelica.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So maybe we can do the next slide, Steve, please. So just a few reminders for year end, and this one is a big one, this holiday season. Please be reminded that we observe that December the 27th, 28th, and January the 3rd during the week, and therefore these dates are going to be closed. ADP offices and Canadian banks will be closed on these dates. So it impacts your regular payroll schedules. Next slide. So there's a small chart here that hopefully that can help you and support you. Please review your schedule and make any changes in advance as necessary that you may need to in accordance to your funding terms. If you need any assistance, please do not hesitate to contact ADP or our payroll team here at United Church. Next slide, please. So one of the important issues with related to a payroll processing is the employment status of an employee through TeamPay. We've been having a bit of a challenge in that the status codes are not properly assigned. So I've put them here. Active employees is very self-explanatory, right? Employees are actively working, earning wages, deductions as required, CPP, EI benefits and pension, etc. When an employee is terminated, again, self-explanatory, no longer working, it's not earning any deductions, it triggers a record of employment where you have to ensure that it's appropriately coded. That triggers the pension team to provide a package with regards to pension options. So the inactive employee, this code has been a bit confusing in that employees who have been terminated have been coded inactive, and that's not the appropriate way to do it. So an inactive employee is generally on a protected leave and it will trigger an ROE. You have to ensure that this employee is on a protected leave. If not, then you have to terminate the employee completely from the system. We're finding increased number of inactive employees on leave of absences without pay, and this is not appropriate. According to CRA, a leave of absence does not include a protected leave. Can I take next slide, please? So Kira is here with us today, who is going to talk to you a little bit about the impact of not appropriately coding or terminating an employee. Kira?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Angelica. Yeah, so like Angelica mentioned, we have been having a bit of a challenges with the inactive codes. Also, the statutory holiday, the point that Angelica made earlier, a really important is a really important item, because if your payroll does not run, for argument's sake, your payroll needs to run on December 27th, and this year it's a holiday and it doesn't run on the 28th or the 31st, and it only runs in January. The information that the pension and benefits team will receive through ADP is going to look as if there was no pay that had run in December. As a result of the absence, a perceived absence of deductions and contributions, there are downstream processes that will trigger a letter going out to you and the employee that's been affected, or employees that have been affected. So in general, the United Church Benefits Center has a fiduciary responsibility to the pension and benefits plan. We receive the information from ADP delayed, right? We only would receive, let's say, October payroll on the 5th or 6th day of November. So everything is quite pushed out for us, and ADP reports is the only source of information. We're working with more than 1,200 individual employers, and it's the only channel that we receive and understand what has happened in your individual payrolls. We don't have any visibility to the money until ADP remits to the plan. So if your payroll did not run for whatever reason in the given month, we will presume that something didn't work out quite correctly, and we will temporarily suspend benefits until we're able to resolve the situation. Pension and Benefit Act requires employer and employee contributions to be remitted to the pension fund within 30 to 60 days, depending on the legislation. And like I mentioned, the non-payment for a month will result in a timely advice to employees and employers that the benefit coverage is suspended temporarily. Some of you may have received such letters. They were quite threatening, and we received some feedback around the tone of the email. We're revising some of the communication, but we just want you to be aware that these letters are well intended. The benefits plan simply cannot afford to cover people who have not remitted the deductions or premiums for that month. So we're trying to do a good job and being good stewards of the plan and making sure that everyone who needs to be covered is covered and has paid for it. And we've had some challenges with some of the pay codes not propagating correctly, which resulted in these letters having been sent out. So if you have any further feedback, if you received such a letter and have any further feedback, we welcome it.
Yeah, Kira, there's a few questions it's Eric, a few questions in the chat box around, could you explain the difference between the funding date and the pay date? While you're doing that, just to note that it's especially important to pay, these stat halls are, and particularly, I think the September 30th one, which is brand new, certainly caused a few glitches, and that's why we're emphasizing the dates on this webinar.
Yeah, so because the information that we received from ADP, we are unable to upkeep the difference and to differentiate between funding and payment date quite as clearly as the Act requires us to. So our best practice is to make sure that in any given month, the money that is remitted by ADP to us is present. So a member who has had uninterrupted employment history, and Eric has brought up September 30th, that was a new holiday and not everything had worked out correctly. In that instance, we have seen quite a number of employers whose payroll supposed to run on the last day of the month, and their payroll had run on October 1st. So when we received the files, and again, that's our only source of data, when we received the files, there were no deductions or remittances in the month of September for these employers. So we're trying to make sure that we send timely notices advising you that something hasn't quite worked out the way it should have, in order to rectify it. And if your if the person that's been affected is on a protected leave, we want to make sure that you are aware of the rights of that employer, and we have an obligation to advise you and follow through.
So there's a question from Ray. Perhaps you should reach out to the payroll person in each pastoral charge before sending those letters to the employees. And maybe rather than assume that the benefits should be terminated or suspended, you should find out if there's a mistake first.
Yes,
Especially
so-
since you've told us that there are likely to be mistakes like this.
Yes, so we have heard this feedback. The staff of the benefit center is 4 people. We have 1,200 employers that are running every month. The data that we maintain is member-centric, so we don't actually have all the current and up-to-date data insofar as the treasurer contact is concerned. So we are advising both the treasurer and the member in the form of a mail, right? We were mailing these letters out. We're unable physically to call or email because the currency of the data that we possess is unreliable at this point. But that's something that we're looking into. If there's an opportunity to call or to email these members just to speed up the answer and the processes, we would try to do that. Right now, it's unfeasible. We haven't found a way to do this yet.
So there's some concern in the chat that people are losing benefits because of a mistake or because of inadequacies in your office instead of because of something they've done wrong. And losing benefits is significant. So we've got one question here from Florence, for example. Our choir person doesn't work in the 2 summer months. We don't want to lose benefits. Is there any way you can make sure people don't lose benefits until it's determined whether there's been a mistake?
No, because we can't afford. We can't, the plan, so somebody who works with the summer closure example is one of them, that their payroll runs in, let's say the church is closed in July and August of a given year, their payroll would be doubled for June and doubled for September, right? In an attempt to make this person whole. But we are only able to book the money that are coming in the month that they've come. Now, the coverage, once the letter has gone out and the treasurer contacts us to explain what has happened in any particular instance, the coverage will be restored without any loss in coverage, right? So the coverage will be restored retroactively. But for now, again, we haven't found a way to be able to, the number of employers is too great, and we haven't found a way to monitor any of these situations. There's just too many flavors and too many different scenarios that are happening.
I think you need to know there are people in the chat who are unhappy with that answer, and somebody says, "Well, I think you should be finding a way."
Yeah.
As a church, people care about individuals. So, and I've heard other comments too. So, we'd encourage you to think about ways to make sure that people who have benefits don't end up paying out of pocket just because a glitch has happened.
So just a couple
I
of
can share.
reminders. Oh, go ahead, Clyde.
I can share a way that I've worked around that problem over the summer. If they're only working 10 months, I pay 10 months over 12 months.
Mhm.
So it's worked out on a monthly basis at a little lower for 10 months, but it covers the 2 summer months and there's no missing any pays. Pensions all work the same way.
Yeah.
Everything's smooth for it.
That's a great suggestion. Yeah, so now, like, we are working on our end as well, but from the perspective of the individual churches, that's part of the reason why I'm here, right? If we can talk and discuss about how the ways that it actually works for, the kind of data that we are privy to, what we see and what we're able to deduce based on the data, we can work out some of the solutions that maybe some of the processing, especially with the migration to team pay, where the treasurer has more control over how the payroll runs. Suggestions that Clyde provided would work quite nicely, because then every month in a year, that person would receive some pay, and we would not see any gaps in employment or perceived gaps in employment. So that's a great idea.
So,
folks, I'm going to just suggest that we'll be reporting on this in future months. For full transparency, we wanted to, highlight the fact that this has been a problem, and I think we're hearing the message loud and clear around the need to fill some of the gaps that have become obvious, as particularly, as I say, when we have these unusual dates, September 30 being the particular problem one. So I'm going to say we'll be reporting back on this in January, and hopefully with a more fulsome answer in terms of some of the some of the mechanisms we put in place to ensure that folks aren't freaked out about basically a faulty memo.
Okay. So thank you. And, the comments in the chat are important, but I think there's enough of a flavor that we've heard that we can move along now and trust that the message has been heard, and we'll look forward to hearing the next step. So should we move on to the next slide then? Because I don't see any other specific questions. I'm just hearing kind of continued chatter about this issue that we've kind of addressed.
So go ahead for the next slide. It's just a reminder to all staff, to everyone, to ensure your payroll schedules are up to date, and if you need to modify them, don't hesitate to call ADP or not hesitate to call the payroll service team. We'll be there to support you and help you in changing those dates if you need to change them.
I'm sorry, ADP is absolutely no help at all. We had one person who was assigned to us who was actually promoted because they were competent. They are absolutely useless. We have our church operations manager, our church secretary, and our bookkeeper all trying to get help from ADP with Zippo results. That's just not a good answer.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you. And let me just step in as the sort of process person here and say, comments in the chat, please, and we will take them seriously. And I think it's important kind of not to disrupt the flow of the presentation, but messages heard. Thank you.
So next slide, perhaps. I think we're going to have a question slide, so we'll keep moving. Next slide, please.
Sure.
So folks, a couple of things. Tomorrow, there'll be an email broadcast. So I just wanted to flag again that the information is now on Church Hub. Next slide, please. You should all, treasurers should all be registered as one of the user profiles that are available. The tabs that you see there will vary based on the user profile. But next slide, and this is the key piece. This is a piece of information that I didn't describe well enough last time. So your 2022 assessment statement is online now, has been for almost a month. And if you go to your Church Hub web portal, you select the assessment tile, you select reports, then target assessments, and you download your PDF to receive your, or print it or whatever you want to do to see your 2022 assessment. And as I say, there'll be an email broadcast tomorrow to all treasurers and lead contacts, because we want to make very sure that people know where the information is and how to access it. Next slide, please. So there's the web link. Maybe Steve, we could paste that into the window, or everyone should probably, back one. And the key items is that web page.
Go and find it. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. It's a day for gremlins, I think. Here we go.
So there's that link there.
Okay, thank you. So just to note that that web page has been updated with current information. A key item that we're hoping more and more people will adopt will be the online authorization approach, either through electronic payments, which we'll be talking about some more shortly, or pre-authorized. We've got, I think, about a third of the country paying pre-authorized, and that's the surest way for everybody to ensure there isn't an interruption or misunderstanding, and it's faithful stewardship, because it's the most cost-effective way at your end and at our end in the General Counsel office. Next slide. So just while we're talking about money, this is one we haven't talked about during COVID at all. But we do have a capital assistance program which has loans up to $150,000, low interest loans, 2.5%. Small grants, 5,000, targeted to smaller congregation. And these are for, I always say roofs and furnaces. It'll cover other things too, but those are the two most important, CapEx items to keep our ministry going. And I also flag here the Faithful Footprints grant program, which is for significant greening initiatives. This is where it's a matching grant up to $20,000 for significant energy conservation and overall greening initiatives. So the web link is there for that as well. Next slide. So the United Church emergency loans, we had a surge of this utilization for this like a year ago, April, May, June. And originally we contemplated loans being available when COVID support wound down. So for those of you who've already taken advantage of this loan program, we've adjusted the interest-free period to align with the federal program, which means that it's December 31st, 2022. We say so far, but I do think that's unlikely to change for the federal loans, and I doubt we will change it either. But again, this is a situation where you can access up to $10,000 on an exception basis, perhaps a larger amount. But in the same model as the federal program, if it's repaid before the interest-free period ends, there's a $500 grant that's included here. So I'm suggesting this, and I've had the general counsel approve the concept of even using this kind of short, loan fund to pay assessments if you're still pinched financially. So that's United Church loans. Next slide, please. Again, the governance side, there's no change here, but for things like budget approvals, if you're going to have your 2022 budget approved, pastoral relations extensions and so on, we have a formal general counsel executive edict or whatever the right word is to extend till you have until June 30th, 2022 to catch that up. That would be annual general meetings, having a board approve your budget and those kinds of responsibilities. Next slide.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions here, sort of very specific ones. I think the one about the music director got answered, but let me ask it. Ron says, our music director won't be working in July and August. He does not receive benefits. What status should I use for him for the summer months?
So sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question.
Okay, I think that's an Angelica question. It might be a Kira question. Our music director will not be working in July and August. He does not receive benefits. What status should I use for him for the summer months, presumably at ADP?
Presumably he's on contract. I guess depends if he's only on contract, he doesn't receive benefits, then terminate.
I mean, typically music directors in a lot of smaller churches don't work 14 hours a week. So he could be an employee, but he doesn't hit the bar for benefits.
So if you want to send that question to the payroll team, we can take it from there just to understand better the relationship.
So he would send that to payroll@united-church.ca. Right. Thank you. And another question, if we received the United Church of Canada $10,000 loan already and paid it back, can we get it again?
This is making up policy, it's Eric. This is making up policy on the fly. The answer, if you were for the federal loan, the CEBA loan, is no. For the United Church, I'm going to say, yes, you can apply for it again for cash flow, but you can't get the second grant.
Okay. The SEBA loan, if we're able to repay it now, should we, or should we hold on to the money till later?
Well, some of that will depend on your philosophy around, use of federal money and your, it is our tax dollars after all. But a lot of treasurers I know would keep that money while it's interest free to fund contingency and a provision for adverse deviation, if you will. So I would personally hang on to it, but if someone wanted to argue that it's taxpayer dollars and it should be paid back as soon as possible, well, that's, I wouldn't, if that's the sentiment of your congregation, you should repay it.
Thank you. I'm not seeing other specific questions on the stuff that you've presented, so I think we should move along.
Okay, so I'm going to turn this over now to Andy Spears and Clyde, and Steve, you'll be doing a couple of little polls here. Folks heard Andy's voice before, but I'll just do a quick introduction. Andy either is or was the treasurer and the lead finance person for Bloor Street United Church in downtown Toronto. But what really, where we're really appreciative of his skills is he's a leading consultant in the whole field of, he's had banks for clients and understands automation in a way that most of us don't. And he has certainly, I've described him as being 2 standard deviations ahead of the church. So whatever that is statistically, some of this might be sound a bit daunting, but we are trying to look at what modern church looks like post-COVID. And in particular, are we going to be passing collection plates? Are we going to be trying to facilitate electronic payments both in and out, even more than we did during COVID? So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Clyde, Andy, and Steve.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Eric. I'm not quite sure what it will mean to be 2 standard deviations out, other than that perhaps I'm quite odd. And I do recognize that I'm a bit of a curmudgeon and kind of a thorn in Eric's side on ADP, but let's go back to how do we move forward together. Steve, can you throw up the slide? I just wanted to talk about what we're going to do over the next few minutes. All right. So one of the things that we want to do over the next few minutes is actually to collect some information and some of your experiences. Most of us for the last year and a half or almost 2 years have not put a collection plate, up and down the pews to collect donations. And indeed, for many congregations, the bulk of the dollars actually for many years have come in through PAR. But things changed quite a bit over COVID, over the period of COVID. And now most congregations, I know certainly Bloor Street, is trying to figure out what the sort of hybrid post-COVID world looks like, both in terms of what the worship service looks like. Is it a kind of mix of Zoom and in-person? But it also raises some questions about how we enable our members to make donations. And I know that Eric and the United, the mothership have been approached by a number of providers who are looking at enabling us to accept donations with some technology solutions. But what we thought we would do is first try to collect some information about how we operated before COVID, what we did during COVID, and then understand really what folks' questions are and what they're thinking about for the world in which we are about to enter. I don't think there will be, I certainly don't expect answers or solutions coming out of this, but it's an attempt to understand whether or not many of us are looking at similar problems, whether or not there is an opportunity for Eric and the mothership to help and provide some technology for which we don't individually have expertise, and to share our individual experiences. So Steve has created a couple of fairly simple surveys that we're going to run through now. They are not rigorously quantitative, and I hope that that people will feel comfortable with simply that the answers are fairly straightforward for most folks.
Sure.
Does that make sense? Everybody okay with that?
So this is a discussion starter. This is not a scientific poll, but just to get a quick sense of what happened to you, what happened before COVID and what changed during COVID. I want to invite you to just take a minute to fill out those two questions. There's a scroll bar down the right-hand side, and you've got we're asking you to click up to 3 answers for each question, but no more than that. And we'll just get a sense of where you are.
Well, I'm now a host, so I can't fill in. Is
You
that right,
can't
Steve?
fill it in. That's right. Sorry about that. I can take that host privilege away if you want.
No, that's fine. I just
So first question, which of these income streams brought the largest number of contributions before COVID? And then scroll down to the second question and which ones brought in the largest number during COVID? And then we'll take a look at the results and see what's changed. I can see them changing. It's really kind of fun. It's like election night here. We're up to 53 people responding.
So are you going to call the winner in, Athabasca?
Oh, I need to tell you the winner is par by a long shot. The question is, what else do we have to deal with? Because the par is huge. But yeah, we've got 104 people voting now. We'll leave it another 20 seconds and then because there's 147 in the room, and then I'll show you what you voted.
And this is before COVID.
Before
First-
COVID and then during COVID.
Yeah,
So
and then during.
question 1 is before, and then question 2 is during, and we'll just see what changed.
Very interesting.
Okay.
Clyde,
I'll
you're
give
looking
you
more and
another
more like
10
Santa Claus.
10 seconds to
You're
answer,
right.
and then I'm going to cut it off. Just in the interest of time. We've got 130 responses, so that's pretty good. Yes, it asks about the number of contributions, not the dollar value. That's true. Dawn, perhaps you haven't answered both questions. You have to have at least one answer in each of the 2 questions before it'll accept your answer. Again, the purpose here is discussion starter. And so there you go. So before COVID, there's the snapshot. Par at 92%, checks in offering envelopes, cash in offering envelopes would have been the top 3. And then checks in the mail, Interact, email transfer, and Canada Helps were very small by comparison. So that was pre-COVID. Scroll down to the bottom, and I'm just using the scroll wheel.
So Stephen, is this popped up on the screen for everybody to see?
Yes, it is. Can you see that?
Hang on, I have to open up my other window maybe. No, I've got one that's a big face of you and then the other
Oh,
with the
you know
whole
what?
gallery.
It may be that you can't. Here.
I can see the top 3 income streams.
Let me
and-
share it that way, and then everybody can see it as my shared screen.
And now you need to scroll down to the second
I'm
one.
getting there. I'm getting there.
Thank you.
So this is during COVID that we're seeing now. This was before COVID up here. Par, checks, and cash. Not a lot of surprises there. And the next big one would be checks in the mail. But during COVID, look what changed. Checks in the mail and Interact e-transfer became huge. Canada Helps added a little bit.
Can't see the second question.
The second question,
Yeah, we can only see before. You got to scroll down. To see
I am sharing my screen and showing the second question.
No, you're not. Unfortunately, it's still before COVID.
Hang on.
I apologize, Stephen. Maybe it's because I'm a co-host. I only see one red squiggle in a corner.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. This is a Zoom issue. And it may
You
be.
can scroll down.
I'm
It's-
trying. Hang on.
I scroll down and I get the second screen.
Yeah.
So
Here, I'm sharing my screen that has this on it. Or if you look at the poll, you can just scroll down within the poll. Anyway, I will tell you the results for those of you who can't see it, but I really am sharing it and I can see it. And you
The
should be able
individual,
to-
each one of us has to scroll down. You can't do it. We have to do it.
That's right. Everybody, if you're looking at the poll, you have to scroll down yourself. If you're looking at my shared screen, it should be visible.
Yeah, I see the top 3 income streams.
Anyway, what has changed during COVID, and this is the important part, is that we're getting a lot more checks in the mail, a huge amount more of Interact email transfer, and Canada Helps. And we're still getting very, very little in terms of debit and credit cards, either on the website or with POS. There's a couple of people getting others, and that's it.
Okay. So
So that's what's new, is what's new is checks in the mail and Interact e-transfer.
okay, that's
And we're
very
not-
helpful.
We're
I mean,
not using any of the other tools to any large extent.
Right. So the growth is really an Interact e-transfer, and for people who are still willing to handle checks in the mail. So
Yep.
what we've got is growth in remote, for obvious reasons. Those are the 2 areas where we've got growth in remote payments. And I mean, and, you know, PAR is a lovely solution in that it's both ongoing and it doesn't require much effort once somebody is set up. Could you take us, Steve, to the next slide that I had to sort of set up a set of questions?
Yeah. There you go.
So here's what we were sort of pondering. I mean, this is just sort of Eric and Steve and Clyde and I debating, which is what we wanted to understand from this assembled group of you know, active volunteer treasurers is, you know, are there other options either that you're, you know, 20-year-olds in your congregation are suggesting that you want to understand, or that you personally would like to understand? You know, are there things that you would like to be able to enable? And, you know, what we expect is that for many folks, how to turn those kind of options on may be difficult, you know, within your own kind of sphere of expertise or within the sphere of expertise of your congregation. And the law, you know, one of the answers may be to have the mothership, and here I'm volunteering Eric and, you know, and whomever else Eric tags, to look at options in terms of helping individual congregations. So if we could, and we're going to do a little survey at the very end of this, asking you what areas you would be interested in either learning more about or in receiving help regarding. But could we, and Stephen, I don't know if we're best to sort of try to put up hands or have people put it in the chat, but, you know, are people entirely happy with the options that they have? Are they interested in looking at options that might be more digital, that they could enable in a hybrid world?
So it looks like from the chat that's coming in, there's a few people using Tithely. There's a few people that have questions about some of these tools. What is Canada Helps? How do you ensure Interact contributions are allocated appropriately? Various different things coming up. There's not a lot of talk, but there's some people kind of wondering about those other tools.
You want to try, folks, clicking on hands up if you've got, again, we're not, I don't think we're going to give you answers, but we just want to kind of get a sense of what people are curious about and where we could help in you as individual treasurers.
Okay.
I think it might be better to get some of the responses into the chat, because hands up don't
Yeah.
show when we've got 150 people online.
Okay, you're right.
Hands up is not helpful, Andy.
Okay,
I think you're getting some anecdotal questions in the chat, and we have a second poll
so let's do
where
the
we can
second
ask
poll,
people if
Stephen.
they
Maybe
want
that's the easier
specific
way with this big
information
a group.
about specific tools.
So let's do the second poll then.
Well, okay, so there you go. Which of these tools are you interested in learning more about or getting some help with? And again, you can choose up to 3. And that might help us think about future programming. What I'm seeing in the chat, and I'll just say that as people vote. What I'm seeing in the chat is specific questions about how one or the other of these tools might work. And so your questions might be answered if we looked at some of these. So I'll leave that up for a little longer.
We should have created a none, not in, know all the answers, don't need help on anything option.
I didn't even think of that, but you're right. That would have been helpful. I think one thing people might find helpful to know about Canada Helps is that a significant chunk of their service charges is something beyond their control. It's related to the charge that the credit card companies charge.
One of the advantages of Canada Helps is it cuts down the amount of work that the individual church treasurer has to do to get the receipts out at the end of the year too.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Canada Helps issues their own tax receipts, so you don't have to do that.
Slightly buggers up your T3010 reporting, however.
Mhm.
So it really depends on how automated your tax receipt issuing capability is within the congregation.
If you're not seeing the poll, you can go and get it again. Move your mouse over the Zoom screen. The bottom of the screen, you'll see all of the icons, and click the one that says polls.
So
If you can't see that, it may be hidden behind the more button, but the poll is open and you're welcome to add to it. So you would have to open it yourself if you've closed it.
Yeah, no, Steve, it seems to be like the poll is ended, or at least I've had a couple of requests to please repost. It seems to be stuck on 23 respondents.
Yeah, I can share those responses, and basically even for the results that we got, what we can see is that people are interested in more information about each of the three: Interac, e-transfer, credit cards on the website, credit cards in a POS device, credit card on the website being the highest percentage. I can relaunch the poll if that's helpful to people.
That might be because, as Eric said, that we seem to be stuck on 23 respondents.
Let's try again. Zoom is amazing and not perfect. Okay, now
That's how I feel about,
Now it's working.
you and Eric and Clyde sometimes,
Yes, if you want to answer again, that would be fine.
Yeah. And just to say to everyone, I mean, these are very sort of initial questions, but we're getting approached by all kinds of, there's all kinds of new financial gadgets, and you can just walk past a device and literally make contributions, with any device very quickly. But we're just trying to get a gauge of what might be used, and in particular, how much change or difference we anticipate coming out of this.
Okay.
Like, I, for one, think we're going to have people are going have gotten way more comfortable with electronic choices, and we'll look for more of that. In other settings, maybe people can't wait for things to return to what they remember as normal.
So I've just closed the poll because we had 94 people responding, and then the numbers stopped changing.
So
But
let
again,
me ask a question, just because the one thing that we have sort of wrestled with, and you certainly see it quite frequently in US churches, and you see it in a number of Canadian churches, and I'm responding to Brian Trueblood, which is whether or not, if we needed to provide a way of making your contribution while you are physically in the church, would folks feel comfortable doing a debit tap, say in the narthex or somewhere in the back of the church, and as opposed to sort of passing the plate? Certainly the proposal we had was that they were going to pass a point of sale device up and down the pews. That seemed a terrible or a very cumbersome solution. But there is, if folks are in fact no longer using cash or checks, but want to be able to make, PAR is obviously preferred, but a debit or credit card payment, do we have one of the things that would be helpful is whether or not they would be, would folks feel comfortable with putting one or two tap machines in, at the back of the church, so folks either on their way in or way out could tap without feeling like they're kind of holding up something as it went past.
So, and let's acknowledge that different settings may have different responses. I mean, there's some rural churches who are saying their internet is too unreliable for POS.
Right.
And that makes sense. older congregation don't see this happening. But there seems to be significant interest in learning more about appropriate procedures to receive Interact email transfers, credit card, debit card on your church website, debit and credit card on a point of sale device. That might be something that would be useful in a future treasurer's webinar, Eric.
Okay, so I see both. I see John Morton, cash machine in church, absolutely not. I assume, John, you're thinking money changers in the temple, but I also see a fair number of, so it'll end up being congregation specific, but I see quite a few folks who find that would be a helpful addition.
Yep. So my question here is, of the 15 people who said other, that they'd like to learn about something other than the ones we put on the list, what was the other? In your case, what would you like to learn more about?
And folks, I just want to flag here that the chat box here, the suggestions and the comments are about as frankly even richer than this little rudimentary poll.
Oh
There's
yeah, fantastic.
All kinds of information sharing and commentary, which will be which Steve will save for us, and we'll be reviewing that as input here as we work on next steps. But one thing for sure, best practices around Interact transfers is going to be one that some people have got this really figured out, and we'll make sure we get the message out. And there's also folks that are interested in some of these tap type devices. We'll probably reach out and ask some of you to pilot that.
Okay. So I think, Andy, you've got the information you need. The detail and the granular stuff is now in the chat.
Yep.
And folks, if anybody wants to save the chat, there's 3 little buttons over beside where you type, on the right of where you type, and it gives you the chance to save the chat. So anybody can always do that in Zoom. But we will certainly.
Are you doing that for Eric and Clyde and I, Stephen?
I will give you a copy of the chat after the program is over, and that'll be really useful as you plan the next sessions in January and February and March.
Great. So do we have further slides? I'm trying to remember.
I mean, there's just one slide, which was just to lay out some of the options, not exhaustive, that certainly we look at as Bloor Street. And this is a mix of, how do both remote and in sanctuary methods, and it's a mix of technology platforms and actual kind of methodologies, but I don't think it's critical for the rest of the discussion, Eric.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things I found really interesting, Eric, in that poll is that nobody is asking for help with PAR. And that suggests to me that the folks on the line here are really comfortable with PAR already and don't feel like it needs a whole lot of extra training.
Well, I'm really pleased to hear that, considering we've been doing it for 40 years. But new treasurers, it's good to know that we've hit their radar as well. Steve, did we have another poll to ask how many people want charge cards?
Oddly enough, I do. So you'll have to open the polls again if you closed it, but let me go find that for you.
And just to say, folks, I've heard a lot of feedback, particularly from smaller places who can't get a credit card. Clyde told me he has 14 clients who can't get a credit card. And I'm in talks with the banks around finding some way for us to broker that and make it available. So I'm wondering how many of you have a credit card? And if you don't, how many might want one?
Well, I can see it changing. You can't yet, but my goodness, that's fairly decisive.
Yeah.
I would say about 2/3 of the churches on the line do not have a credit card, and 2/3 of the churches would be really interested if you can find a way for them to get one, Eric.
Okay, so we're working on that. And basically for anyone who's worked for a corporation, the structure we're looking, or at least one of the structures we're looking at, is the same way that if you claimed expenses, where you needed to submit them promptly to get reimbursed, or there would be interest charges that you'd be liable for. Similarly here, we might be able to have some kind of umbrella program the same way we do for directors and officers insurance and that kind of thing. So we'll keep you posted. I had a meeting with one of the big banks today on this subject, and I can see that there's interest. I thought there would be.
Sure. So I can say that I've just posted or I'm just sharing the results of the credit card, and yeah, the early results are pretty much the same. About 2/3 don't have a credit card. About 2/3 would use one if you can find a way for them to do it. And I can tell the folks on YouTube who are adding into their chat that the comments they're making are consistent with what we're hearing here. There's interest in this, Eric.
Great. Okay, thank you. So I guess we can keep moving the slides. We're right at the end, I think, so this, folks, is the usual contact information. We still have a help desk for getting set up with CRA. I still get requests every week for that. We've talked about payroll assessments, church loan programs, stewardship. Again, these are intended to be just a quick reference for those of you who might keep the slides. Next slide, please. Again, follow up. Angelica, Clyde, and I have our emails out here. We're protecting Andy for the moment, and this feeds the next webinars. So let me move now to the next and final slide. I think I'd like to say thank you. Yeah. So again, thank you for what you do for your own church, for our whole church, and the generosity of your time and talents is so appreciated. And hopefully we can come up with some ideas here together to make things either cheaper or faster or easier or something like that. Our webinar in January will be, I think, based on popular requests so far, T3010 completion, line by line walkthrough. Also, Clyde has some wonderful template structures that he uses for allocating costs to categories. So we'll take you through that. And we'll also report back. We heard you loud and clear on the payroll side around what improvements are being implemented to deal with this, particularly with these stat halls, because stat halls happen every year. So thank you for what you do. And unless there are any, again, there's some great commentary in the chat box, and we'll be using it actively in planning the New Year's webinars. Over to you, Steve.
So I think that draws to a close our program tonight. It was a shorter program than we sometimes had, but an important one. And the feedback that you've offered, both on the payroll issue and on the income streams issue and tools, is really valuable. So many, many thanks.
Yeah. And Steve, I'm just seeing some questions. There's at least a few new treasurers who are asking about perhaps a webinar for new treasurers. I used to do those all the time and used to travel around the country. I love now that we can do it by webinar. So I'll talk to Steve. We might even do a second session in January, or certainly offer that up in a way that we get that information to you promptly.
Okay. So again, there's a question about how to save the chat. If you go into the chat box, on the right-hand side, you'll see three little dots right down at the bottom where you're typing. There are three little dots. Those three little dots, they call it a hamburger menu. This one's kind of a hamburger on its side. But you click that and it gives you a bunch of different options, and one of them is to save the chat. So if you ever want to save the chat in Zoom, now you can know how to do it. In the meantime, we are going to draw this to a close. Want to thank you for hanging in there with us throughout all of 2021. What a remarkable community this group has become. There's about 140 of you, 150 of you who sign on month by month by month, and that's fabulous. We will not be meeting in December. We will get dates posted for January, February, March within a couple of weeks. Eric and I just need to put our calendars together, but it'll be towards the end. It'll be a Wednesday night towards the end of January, and we'll confirm that with you. We'll send out an email to the treasurer's email list, as well as to the United and Learning list, so you should be able to get it in that way. Merry Christmas to you all. Thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time around. I'm going to take the facilitators into a private breakout room here, and I'll join you just as soon as I got the recording stopped.